The world of The Witcher, Blood Origin, is a medieval realm divided into 3 kingdoms that have been at war for 1,000 years. Want to explore the exotic serpent clan who serve the southern kingdom of Darwin? Well, be introduced to a mix of Caucasian, Black, Asian, and Latino people you would find in relative proportion in metropolitan Los Angeles. What about the Raven clan that defends the northern kingdom of Prussia, a place where the inhabitants are the same mix of Caucasian, Black, Asian, and Latino in relative proportion to metropolitan Los Angeles? Finally, take a journey to the mysterious far-off kingdom of Zintrea, where the folk are the same mix of Caucasian, Black, Asian, and Latino in relative proportion to metropolitan Los Angeles. But don't fear, if you still have a yearning for exotic medieval fantasy, then embark on a journey of escapist epic adventure in Willow, set in the ancient kingdom of Ter Asleen, where the folk are the same mix of Caucasian, Black, Asian, and Latino in relative proportion to metropolitan Los Angeles. And from there, be swept away in the grand fantasy spectacle of The Lord of the Rings of Power, where the insular island society of Numenor is made up of a mix of Caucasian, Black, Asian, and Latino people in relative proportion to metropolitan Los Angeles. Then be swept forth to the distant and utterly different geography and climate of the Southlands, a pastoral folk made up of exactly the same mix of Caucasian, Black, Asian, and Latino people in relative proportion to metropolitan Los Angeles.
Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. Welcome to another edition of Dungeons and Discussions, and I hope I got you a laugh there. And with me apparently is Den Memel. Actually, I think Grim is still getting his stuff together, so I'm going to give him a couple of minutes. But yeah, today we are talking systems and advancement. Grim, let me know in the private chat whenever you're ready. But so yeah, really quick. There's kind of a development I've been noticing happening, and I guess it's only probably in the Twitter sphere. I don't notice that it's so much an every person type thing as it is just, amongst my friends. But there seems to be a movement away from the term OSR, and I'm not sure what that is all about.
Hello.
Hello, Graham.
Sorry about that. Just as I was about to come and join you, we had a delivery at the house, so I had to sort that out.
Oh, anything cool?
Frozen fish.
Well, okay. We're not going to review frozen fish.
No, that's pretty good.
Joe Gardner, you got a kick out of that opening, but to be fair, human actors only come in so many colors. Well, yes, Joe, but the point of that particular piece is that one of the things that, kind of makes fantasy realms of any sort more believable is the fact that, like the real world, a fantasy world is going to tend to have a kind of an ethnically similar group of people living in it, just because of climate adaptation as much as anything else. It's kind of like why people who live in cold frozen climes like Scandinavia and stuff develop blue eyes and lighter skin and bigger frames. It's so they can hold in heat better, and because the color of their eyes actually is better for reflecting the snow and stuff. Whereas guys like myself, who are darker skinned and darker eyed and darker haired, are more resistant to the sunlight because we live in a place that's hot all the time. Although I'm starting to think that Grim is starting to become an honorary Mexican himself over there in Britain.
Hardly.
Cardinal Sin, you say Dungeons and Dragons already had the Drow elves. They had operating word now. Paizo has gotten rid of the Drow elves. As a matter of fact, I made a really nice joke about that in the last game I ran. The PCs actually ran into a Drow who was bemoaning the fact that their entire species was completely removed from a plane of existence, totally, utterly, and were refugees in this new world. Yeah, Paizo got rid of Drow. And speaking of which, I just saw your review of Pathfinder Second Edition.
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you've said on that one. Since we are talking about systems, we might as well go ahead and look at Pathfinder Second Edition. Naturally, my group has played with First Edition Pathfinder for the longest because it was a natural progression from Third Edition, and it was
Yeah.
a much more smooth transition. When I got my Second Edition Pathfinder books, and keep in mind, I was one of those guys who pre-ordered it really, really quickly, so I got like the very first batch of books with all of its errors in it, first printing and everything. But yeah, I took one look at that mess and I was just like, what in the hell? My players are never going to want to touch this. And just to be fair, I sat down. I mean, the first thing I do with any system to really evaluate if it's any good or not is I look at it from a player's perspective. If I can pick it up as a player, then I'm pretty sure I can fudge my way through it as a DM, is my rationale. So I actually tried to build a character in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And after 2.5 hours of fruitlessly flipping back and forth through all the pages and trying to figure out all the minutia of how shit worked in that system, I just decided, you know what? This is not worth my time.
Well, I did manage to make a character, but it's not that the system's difficult. It's that so much is tied to so much else, and everything is its own special rules exception. Yeah, and the layout is meant to make things easier, but it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. And then they got all the little marks on everything, and you're like, what the hell are all these things?
Yeah. And it's all very well having those in the book, like I said in my review. But when you're copying down your character sheet, you're not going to doodle the little icons and things and remember them. What's the point?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, not only that, but I mean, there's early on, I noticed there was a couple of broken combinations in there to begin with. Really quickly, like, okay, they have, half elves and half orcs split down into basically like racial subtypes of humans.
Yeah.
However, if you look at them, and things may have changed since that first book. I mean, they may have brought out more of them since then. But at first glance, half elf gets all of the human feats, gets access to all the human feats, but they also get access to all the elf feats, which there are a shitload more elf feats than there are orc feats.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to get the book back down off the shelf now. But it looked to me like half elves and half orcs only had very few feats specific to them in the first few levels. So the racial feats or ancestry feats, I suppose, but they didn't have them at the higher levels. I don't remember, but I think they only got access to the human ones besides their own. So, though it'd be easy to justify taking an elf one or an orc one, I suppose.
Well, it's just that to me, it looked like half elves were way better than half orcs if you were going to pick one of the half races. Just because of the availability of feats and the number of feats you had available to you. The other thing I noticed too is it's possible to cast up to 3 spells in one round using their spell segment system.
With their 3-action economy thing. Yeah.
Which, once again, it brings into play the old chestnut of, hey, the spellcasters are way overpowered. Except now they're way overpowered at low levels to start with. So
yeah. Barrage of magic missiles.
Well, I mean,
I don't know. I didn't see anything objectionable in the system. It's a perfectly cromulent system, but I couldn't figure out who or what it was for. Right, it doesn't fulfill a need in the way that the Pathfinder First Edition did.
Yeah.
And it's not really that compatible with older Pathfinder stuff or
Nope.
older 3.5 stuff. So, yeah. You may as well have gone the whole hog and created your own complete system from scratch, really.
Yeah, I think it's dissimilar enough from anything that WotC produces to begin with. So whatever they're doing to it now with another edition is just kind of like,
Yeah, this is like a revised edition to clear it up. But I mean, the thing to do would have been Continuity 5th edition, but it looks like that's what Kobold Press is doing and a couple of other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Well, when I started out talking about OSR and people separating themselves from it, we had the whole OGL fiasco last year, and everybody and their mom was basically trying to do everything they could to divest themselves of any attachments to the Wizards of the Coast products.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we saw like Black Flag and
disappointing.
Even other little systems, though, I noticed. Alex T's Sacrifice, Iron, and Incense rules, which I have the first edition copy of, recently released a newer edition of the book, which is further separated out of OGL. I haven't actually sat down and done a side-by-side comparison between the two to see what all the major differences are, but I will do that here in the upcoming weeks when I get my hard copy, because I do hard copies.
Yes.
But, so the thing is, it's kind of like, I'm noticing a lot of people are trying to separate themselves out of the OSR. In fact, I've seen creators actually saying, that they don't identify with the OSR anymore, or that they're not part of the OSR anymore. And I'm not calling anybody out, and I'm not saying, oh, you're bad because you're doing this. What I'm just saying is that it's kind of a movement I'm seeing happening. And I mean, and to be clear, for anybody who didn't know already, OSR stands for Old School Renaissance, which is supposedly supposed to be people playing older forms of games and not the current edition of, D&D.
Yeah. And derivatives and house rules of old school.
Yeah.
It's kind of like going back to the beginning and starting over. What if D&D had just come out? How would I adjust it for my table? How would I write different rules? That sort of thing.
Yeah. And the thing is, you have all these little weird camps of people who are, trying to do things like, say, like, the only true OSR is if you play original D&D as it's written, or OSR is only D&D. And my interpretation of it is really loose, I guess, because as far as I'm concerned, if you're using the 6-stat system and you have a leveling system attached to it, and you have like basic concepts like hit points and armor class, you're pretty much playing, an OSR game.
Yeah. Or, not even that. You can get further removed. Like Avengers Crimson Dragon Slayer is barely a game at all, really.
Yeah.
In terms of system, that's absurdly light, but he describes that as OSR. And yeah, I can see that. Mork Borg is pretty different. I'd call that OSR. And then there's people who've retro-cloned different games than D&D. So you can get the old Marvel Superheroes phase rip system and numerous other examples. So I think it's a fairly loose label anyway, but people are treating it like it's an ideological badge, right? So like in the music scene, right? Indie music used to mean just, independent label. So yeah, it might be it's Spiral Carpets and it might be Napalm Death. But yeah, they were both on independent labels. But gradually it became to be associated with a particular style. And so when you said indie, people had in mind, Smashing Pumpkins or whatever.
It's you remember you'll be familiar with this. Remember when we had goth music, right? And then people started putting synthesizers and stuff into it more and more, and then it became goth, or it became dark wave.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were pissed off at a lot of people were pissed off at the term dark wave because they thought dark wave, a wave meant it could be anything.
Yeah. And then us old school goths didn't much cotton to the Marilyn Manson crowd at the time. And then emos aren't goth.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's almost the same kind of thing happening in the games movement at this point. People are, I hate to say gatekeeping, but because I don't think that's really true. I don't think they're really gatekeeping. But they're trying to, what do you call it? Click.
Yeah,
you know what
cliques.
I mean? Yeah. They're trying to form like little cliques of what the way that they play games and stuff, and if you're not in that clique, they're gonna treat you like you're an idiot or whatever.
Yeah, but so they're breaking it down, making it more granular. It's to the point where it starts to sound like they're telling you about their favorite heavy metal band. Oh yeah, man, I'm really into like Septic Fetus at the moment. They're like this orchestral black metal, but they've got a lot of heavy influences from sludgecore. It's down and down and down, refined to that one band as its own genre, apparently.
Yeah, and I mean it's like I had a conversation. I had an interview with one of the original black metal musicians. One of the guys from the old church burning days. Actually knew all those guys in the old bands. And it's like I was talking to him. I said I don't think black metal really exists as it's in its true form anymore anyway, because how far removed from the original crappy garage tape sound with the barely recognizable chords and screeching and stuff and bad vocaling and everything else do you have to get before it stops having the original black metal feel? I mean, it's overproduced and all this. I mean, certainly you can't call Dimmu Borgir black metal anymore. It's kind of its own thing. And he agreed with me on that, because it's like, it's really not black metal anymore. And I don't think anybody is making black metal.
Yeah, it doesn't help that people have tried to ascribe ideology to the OSR, like saying, "Oh, it's all right-wing people or Nazis or whatever." That doesn't help because A, it's not true, and B, it causes people to distance themselves from it just because they're afraid of getting tarred with the same brush. So.
Mm-hmm. And Kit Marlowe has a good point. He says, since OSR is so poorly defined, Renaissance and Revival rules, how can one tell if people are leaving it? Well, and I mean, basically, I see posts by people up on Twitter, and they say that they don't really consider themselves to be OSR anymore, or they try to break down definitions of OSR and say that, if you're not using this system or that system or whatever, you're not doing OSR. And again, I'm not calling anybody out. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying, you're a bad person for coming up with this stuff. It's just a trend.
Yeah. You can tell because people always announce that they're leaving and flounce off.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, like I said, in my opinion, if you're using the 6 stats and using a leveling system and all, you're pretty much OSR. To that effect, I would almost say that there are other systems that are very much like OSR, even if they're not. And that would include anything from, Chaosium, with their basic system.
Yeah, it was one of the earliest role-playing systems, and it hasn't changed that much.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is old school. It's very old school. RuneQuest is old.
Yeah.
So, and it's almost compatible. I mean, and I think that's the thing, Castles and Crusades does not define itself as OSR, but they have what they call the old school feeling and stuff. I'm kind of like, well, if I can take your stuff and more or less use it more or less seamlessly with something else I'm playing that is OSR, it's pretty much OSR. Kind of how I feel about it.
What if we were to define it as vintage role-playing, or role-playing as it was done back when, even if it's not a direct copy? How old would that be? Because 25 years is one sort of vintage definition, 50 years is another, 100 is an antique. We're a ways from that yet, thankfully.
Yes.
So where would you put it? 25 years? So that would be anything up to 98. It's
yeah, Cardinal Sin. Yeah, Call of Cthulhu definitely falls into that category. But okay, I was thinking about this today. 3rd edition is almost 20 years old at this point.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, if you drove a car that was 20 years old, you wouldn't call it a classic.
That'd be a beta.
Yeah. But if it was 30 years old or 40 years old, it would be a classic, right?
Yeah.
So I guess if you look at it in the same way as any vehicle of a certain age could be considered to be vintage or classic.
Look up what they say about vehicles, actually. Yeah, carry on.
Oh, sure. Of course, he has to go into research mode. But yeah, I don't bemoan anybody, wanting to distance themselves from OSR, separate themselves out on OSR. I mean, this is just something that happens. People tend to have like minds on opinions and stuff like that. I mean, look at the crap that we still get into as far as online arguments about stuff. People still want to have wars about THAC-THACO and ascending versus descending armor class, and that's just, I think that's just nerds in general. Everybody kind of likes their own system, and they feel like they need to defend it. And I wish they wouldn't take it out on each other so harshly, because a lot of times some words are exchanged that are probably more harsh than what is meant. And hurt feelings do arise, and that also kind of forms cliques. And I get it. Everybody wants to have their sandwich their way. It's just, I think as a whole, we can agree that we're all kind of shopping at the same grocery store, more or less. And the grocery store meaning TTRPG fandom in general. It's just kind of like, which ingredients are you going to go and buy and put on your sandwich? Like maybe I like peanut butter and mayonnaise. No, I don't. But I'm just saying, some people are going to go, what the hell is that? That's so weird. Now, there's no way I would eat that.
Fish finger sandwiches.
Yeah.
So the research has actually confused matters even more. Yeah. I don't really know why I get associated with the OSR so much. The vast majority of my work is not old school, so I don't know.
That's true. But you did, and the funny thing is, the one OSR product, the definitive OSR product that you created, besides Whitechester, is Machinations of the Space Princess, and most people don't know about it.
Yeah. Right. So cars. Okay, this gets very confusing.
Okay.
Right. 25 years is a common idea, that it must be at least 25 years old or 40 years or older. Modern classics, it has to be older than 10 years. According to His Majesty's revenue collections, a classic car is defined as a car that is older than 15 years with a value of £15,000 or more. So, yeah, these kind of categories seem to be pretty arbitrary.
Yeah, I'm about to say my car is almost in that range.
Is it worth £15,000?
Oh, hell no.
Well,
it's worth maybe 2,000, 3,000.
but see, then you will find things like beat up old Volkswagen Beetles are considered classics, but not many of them are going to be worth £15,000.
No.
And Citroen 2CVs as well, Mini Coopers, things like that. It's yeah, so it's a tricky thing.
Well, I mean, and I think the same thing still applies to gaming. As far as what people are going to define. I mean, how long has Savage Worlds been out? Savage Worlds has been out for a long time now.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Savage Worlds is an independent system, or Savage Worlds as it appeared in Deadlands, which is where it started.
Well, I guess you'd have to say, go ahead and take it all the way back to Deadlands, because Deadlands is all the way back in the 90s.
Yeah. So Savage Worlds by itself was first published in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
And Deadlands was first published in 1996.
Yeah, so it would be a classic. So you could say Savage Worlds is like classic.
To me, it feels like you'd have to go back to the 70s and 80s at the moment for something to be considered a classic RPG. And we're 2023, so 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So anything from the 70s when everything started through to 1983 at the moment. That's where I would think about something being a classic, and then advancing year by year.
Okay. Well, I mean, and that's okay. And that stuff would definitely be OSR, but would it be,
classics?
Well, I mean, Traveler is that old, but it's not. To me, it's not OSR. Because it's not really, because it's it doesn't use the 6 stats. it doesn't have hit dice. It doesn't have armor class.
But does it have to be Dungeons and Dragons derived to be old school? I would say not. Or is that just retro gaming? Is that something different?
I don't know. I think retro would be different. Hey, Victor. Morning. And we have Ryan.
Hey.
Hey, Ryan.
on location this morning. So, how's everybody doing?
Oh, everybody's doing okay, bud.
I'm just taking a look at releases by date. So
yeah, I was listening to that, and I'm kind of in the middle of this philosophical shift with it, where OSR isn't necessarily, hit dice and the straight 6 stats. It's more philosophy of what you feel at the table, if that makes any sense. I'm very conflicted right now, and I need to redefine in my brain what OSR really is. So,
well, see, I don't think you're alone on that. I think a lot of people are kind of redefining OSR. And again, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody. I'm not saying anybody's bad for wanting to say that they are not OSR. I mean, like I said, Castles and Crusades says that they are not OSR. And certainly nobody would say anything bad about those guys. Because
no, I think the creator has the ultimate... they're the ultimate decision makers in what label they put on their product. Mm-hmm. So...
And I almost wonder if at some point or another, our friends down at the coast are going to try to claim OSR as a term, since they're the ones who have all the copyrights on the original product.
I wouldn't be surprised, I could see that happening. I could see them saying, look, there's all this other stuff out there, but here's the granddaddy of them all, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't think they would due to the negative associations, but I can see them saying something like classic gaming or retro gaming or
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they just spin it. Hey, we're vintage, we're classic, we're the original, something like that, right?
Yeah, yeah. If you're playing something derived from our original system. Yeah, Thaco the Clown. Jesus, Thaco the Clown. So yeah, I mean, there we go for systems. I guess we need to talk about the other part of this too, is advancement. And now when I talk about advancement, I mean it's like every player who's playing a game wants to see some kind of progression, some kind of growth. Nobody wants their character to kind of like live in a static, you're never going to get any better than this. This is the limit of what you are. And I think that's one of the reasons why level systems are so popular, because it shows a visible means of advancement in the character. Although, as I like to point out a lot of times, a lot of systems that use levels have what's called dead levels, or what I call dead levels. I don't know if anybody else uses dead levels as a term, but I do. And dead levels is a level where you get hit points, maybe, and some more skills if it's skill based, but you don't really get anything, a lot of bang for your buck.
That was one thing about Pathfinder that I maybe didn't mention in my review, is that there is something every level. It's another feat that makes the game complicated, but you get something meaningful every level.
Oh, don't know if you guys have read it, but for me, The Foundation of the OSSR is a quick primer for old school gaming by Matthew J. Finch, and not every classic game follows his philosophy. Well, I mean, and see, that's, nobody would say, oh, Matthew J. Finch doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, because obviously he is an old school guy. But I don't necessarily cling to his definition either. Because I think the OSR just kind of is what it is at this point. What if this is as good as it gets? Oh, maybe so.
It's an unflattering comparison, but I think it's a bit like trying to define fascism.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't have a specific set definition, but if you have 70% of the things that are common between different strands, then you can safely say, it is this. So maybe it's a list of things, and if you combine enough of those, it's an OSR. Yeah.
I almost kind of think that OSR has kind of become a devalued word, kind of like that same one that people use to define Germans from the 1940s. But
we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
I'm not talking about the negativity so much, but just the fact that the overuse of it has kind of lessened what it's all about. Because like I said, if you play 4th edition, are you OSR? You play 3rd edition, are you OSR? Well, I mean, 3rd edition is older than 4th edition, and 3rd edition is almost 20 years old. Therefore, is it OSR? If you talk to a lot of the, grognards from the 70s and stuff, they'll say, hell no, that's not OSR.
I just tiptoed through this minefield. I'm not going back.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be talking about... Sorry.
No. Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say, we're supposed to be talking about advancement now. Are there any OSR games that don't do class level advancement?
Well, that's the thing. I think if you are talking OSR stuff, you're pretty much always going to have that level advancing system. Now, I mean, if you're going to broadly define OSR as to be like a Chaosium system, that doesn't have levels.
That doesn't.
Yeah. And arguably, I would say it's probably one of the better systems out there, just because you do get a concrete realization of how much better you're getting by using those skills, not just by arbitrarily hitting a certain number of experience points and wham bam, suddenly you get all this cool stuff. Or even if you go back and do the training montage thing that you're supposed to do.
Players do love their levels, though.
in 10 years will 5e be OSR? Well, that kind of depends, Joe. As I've said before, whatever WotC's coming up with now, I call it 5.5. Even though they're not willing to change it. I certainly think that whenever you bring a rulebook change, because there's going to be a change between 5th edition rulebooks and whatever they're coming out with, whenever those new rulebooks drop, there'll be a big enough difference that, 10, 20 years from now, those old 5th edition rulebooks that, are out of print are kind of going to become OSR.
But it really hinges on the players. I think what makes the OSR is the player right now, not necessarily the rule set, right? The players desired this feeling, this style of gameplay, this philosophy in their gaming, and that's what sort of sparked the beginning of the OSR and let us ride this wave and proudly say that we embody that philosophy. Are we textbook OSR across the board? No, I think all three of us here can say that, right? But it has to happen with the 5e crew too. So they're going to have to say, as the new stuff comes out, no, this is our jam. And then it becomes its thing. Whether, it'll never be OSR because they would never allow that to happen. Right, they would never say, well, we're going to include this. And I think rightly so, because it is dramatically different. But, the players have to cling to what they like in order for that to, that serendipity doesn't happen. They say lightning doesn't strike twice, and it's going to be that case too, because I really see the current base moving along with the current. Right? Whatever's newest, latest, greatest, that's what they're going to play. So OSR is an interesting position as generationally in our hobby, right? They're the Gen X. OSR is the Gen X of tabletop role playing.
Well, that's a way of putting it. Yeah. Greg, I think you're right. That's kind of like the same. That's the same thing that I say too. 5e won't be OSR in the same way that 3e is an OSR 20. See, and you define 3e as not OSR. I also would say that 3e really isn't OSR because it's so different from basic D&D or even advanced D&D that it's almost its own animal.
Is some of it the level of complexity involved? Do you think OSR games tend to be simple and should be simple?
I kind of tend to think that's part of it. Because this is the thing. We've seen the 6-stat system at its crunchiest. And although people still like 3rd edition and people still like Pathfinder 1st edition, there's still a lot of fans of both of those, including my table. A lot of people, myself included, are kind of being a little bit more preferential to swinging back in the opposite direction, going back to simpler systems, because the simpler systems kind of favor the DM a little bit more because things aren't so well defined and they leave a lot more up to DMs to define, which gives them more control.
I think Alexander Macris is the only real big fan of absolute simulationism left.
Yeah, maybe so. His system is really dense, and sometimes a little bit hard to follow. Although I like it. I've played it, and the nice thing is with the way his system is set up. Like I said, I was able to use a basic, literally a written in the 80s basic D&D game and pretty much run it 1-for-1 under Axe, and I had no compatibility issues. And I guess that's kind of where OSR also kind of falls into place. Is if you can dovetail one element into the other, it works. Whereas now I'm running, on Sundays, every other Sunday, I'm running Other Dust as a replacement for Modern, but I'm kind of working Darwin's World into it, and I'm using original Darwin's World mechanics and systems and everything else in Other Dust, which is a little bit more complicated because I'm having to do it kind of on the fly. it's similar enough that I'm not having any problems, but I'm also having to use, a lot of head math to convert numbers and things. So, would I say, D20 modern is OSR? Well, sort of. It kind of dovetails into it. It kind of works. Could I do it with 4th edition? No.
No.
The
Gamma World.
Not unless you want like a migraine and a battle map. You're not doing it with the 4th edition.
Well, and see, I think that's also kind of part of what defines an OSR product versus a non-OSR product is if you can take it and you can more or less marry it with a lot of the older rules, with whatever degree of difficulty, then it kind of works as old school. I could conceivably pick up, my old tattered red book of basic D&D and, grab, let's say, the 3rd edition copy of Ravenloft, which I have, off my shelf. And I could conceivably run these two things together for a group.
So some of it's that kind of ecosystem of broadly compatible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, hypothetically, you could run old basic D&D modules using Dungeon Crawl Classics, even though it's named stats different things, and it's still, broadly speaking, compatible.
Mm-hmm. I think compatibility is part of it. 2nd edition is as old to us as 1955 was. Yeah, it really is. But, a lot of people still like 2nd edition. Although a lot of people are like, oh, 2nd edition is crap compared to 1st and all that. I get that. But,
But, looking at the success of Darkly Dark,
mm-hmm.
And the existence of friend of the channel, Aaron the Pedantic, who is a new player but likes the old school stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not. Not all hope is lost, perhaps. There seems to be an appetite for that kind of different style.
Yeah. I think as long as anything that you, like I said, as long as you have anything that is derived from the 6 stats and still uses, the same basic systems like, hit points, armor class, whether you use ascending or descending, that's kind of like not the issue so much. A little bit of math one way or the other. But as long as you, if I can take an old, like, OD&D book and still run it using something that's newer without a whole lot of difficulty, a whole lot of number crunching and changes, like I couldn't do it with 5th edition because it's just too different. But, that's kind of where I'm at with it. But getting back to advancement, which is kind of where I wanted to go. I've seen a lot of systems that I like, and one of them recently was Black Sword Hack. Now they don't have classes in their system, so that's one thing to think about. But the other thing is, every other level, they're getting a new talent, and they're getting attribute bonuses, which is something that I think is cool. Because for one thing, you noted this in your 2nd edition Pathfinder review, and that is nobody who's playing 5th edition is picking up the feats because the stat advancement is so much better. And I thought, yeah, that's true. Even though 5th edition, caps stats at 20.
I've been contradicted in my comments of people saying that they do love getting the feats and stuff for their characters, but not in my experience, not in my circle's experience. It's just always better to get the stat boost.
I tend to vacillate on the few times I've played 5th edition. I tend to like the feats because I'm a third edition player, and I loved what you could do with feats in third edition, and that is, you could mix and match them to such a degree that you could create whole new systems of play. You could, and then when Pathfinder came out with its archetype system, buddy, yeah, I found really incredible new ways to break the game. But we had fun with it because you could pretty much make the character you wanted to make. It's just, it unfortunately had, some of the problems that I don't like about a lot of the modern games, and that is it's too damn crunchy. The hit point bloat is a real thing versus the damage dealing.
Well, that's why we're seeing people take the stat bumps too, right? Even if you are not, here, I'll use the right lingo, an optimizer. You don't have a choice if you want to be effective. If you don't want to be the fifth wheel in your party, you have to really take a step back at each level as you advance, specifically with Pathfinder 2, and say, am I even going to be as effective as the other weakest link in the party? And it really it's adversarial party advancement, and that's one of the reasons I don't like it, because you're pigeonholed. Either you do the min-max, or you have a less effective character that impacts not only your enjoyment of the game, but everybody in your group. So it's a tough spot to be in as a player. Yeah, and hence it's not on my shelf, right?
I hate optimization.
Yeah, but I play with a group of power gamer min-maxers, so I'm used to this.
So you have to do it too, even if you don't want to, right?
Yes, exactly. It becomes a case of, I've run to try to make a point, I've tried to actually run underpowered by the book characters and not use all the optional rules and crap that all they're using. And it usually ends up with me having the most number of party deaths. Or I should say character deaths. I hold the record at my table for the number of character deaths because of this. Because I will stubbornly cling to, well, it's by the book. And, sure enough, my character will, end up getting killed because he's under hit pointed or not as powerful, doesn't have as many game breaking mechanics. I mean, yeah, I'm just using the feats out of the book, and it's still somewhat effective, but not as effective as if I took, a homebrew race with all the super duper powers that some of my friends come up with.
Yeah, see, this is part of the reason I don't play a lot of online computer games, like MMOs or paid service games, because if you play like I do, where you're more interested in the aesthetic and what would my character choose, nobody wants to play with you because you're not playing a maxed out character. Oh, you're not playing this build. Why not? Nobody wants to play with you. So
yeah,
there's no point.
You only have this much DPS, man.
Well, yeah. I mean, see, but yeah, that thing is still, that happens in 5th edition as well. Everybody knows that there is an optimized, what do you call it? There's a metagame. There is a metagame for the character builds. You take this kind of barbarian with these kind of abilities. You take this kind of druid with these kind of abilities. You don't take rangers at all because they suck. Which didn't used to be the case.
Do we prefer the kind of individuated advancement, like in Storyteller System or Call of Cthulhu, where different skills and things go up by themselves?
I'll be honest. For me, if I were building a level-based game, and I am, slowly, I think the main thing I want to focus on is not having any dead levels. I don't want anybody to feel like you got a level and got nothing except some more hit points. And I hate hit point bloat anyway. I would at least try to make sure that every level you had something to look forward to. And that's one of the reasons I think Pathfinder 1st edition was good, because they recognized that people wanted to feel powerful and get something at every single level. It's very rare in Pathfinder 1st edition that you got dead levels, which is why you got to feat every other level.
Yeah.
Versus
See,
third edition.
I'm just not a fan of level systems, but players love them because you get that big dopamine hit when you level up.
You do.
But
you do.
Yeah, it costs a lot in terms of character customization, individualism, the way in which you structure play, and so on. So to me, the negative impacts far outweigh the positive of someone's eyes lighting up as they get that last 5 XP.
Mm-hmm. Look, some comments we have right here. Bob Jester, hey, nice to see you. Habits of the players that define whether their table is old or new school or a mix has a lot to do with play styles too, storytelling or more gamist. Well, I mean, that certainly there's that. Should be asked, is OSR defined by a system or a play style? I kind of think it's defined by a system, more or less. But
form follows function.
Yeah.
So, a system can encourage or discourage certain styles of play.
Yeah, like if you play Powered by the Apocalypse, that definitely is going to affect your play style. Because there's no min-maxing in that. Your characters are already gods, pretty much.
Yeah, and you can't really play it as a simulation of reality.
Yeah, if it's defined by system, your choices range between first edition, BX, DCC, or 5e. Okay. And I would mostly agree with those choices too. I would also throw in like Worlds Without Number as old school, just because it kind of is. And definitely Scarlet Heroes, which is a newer system, but it plays closer to old school than a lot of other systems I've seen, like DCC. I don't know. I mean, would you disagree or agree? You guys have both played it.
It's really stuck in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I wouldn't put Scarlet Heroes necessarily in either column, and that's not a bad thing. I thought it was good, right? It does what modern game design should do, which is borrows and steals from the best of the past and innovates on it. And that's one of the things that I really liked about it. Like you were talking about level progression. I'm struggling with that because you guys know I'm doing my thing too, the Eternal Projects, right? And I've decided that it's going to be class-based advancement, right? You're going to be able to get stuff every level, not have those dead levels, not have this generic stuff. There is generic stuff that you get as your character progresses, but it's class progression that I went with just to avoid having those levels of nothing. So, I don't know. Scarlet Heroes, it does some things incredibly well, built on the foundation of the past. And that's why I still, back to the original thing. Is it OSR? Sure. Because it's built on the house of OSR.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel about it as well. Of all the newer games that I have played, and I've played quite a few. I mean, I've played, LFG. I played, Scarlet Heroes. I played Worlds Without Number. I've played Castles and Crusades. I picked up Dungeons and Delvers. I haven't run it yet, but I plan to at some point. And Sacrifice, Iron and Incense. Scarlet Heroes feels the closest to OD&D, probably because it is so just simple. But since the characters are not so fragile, I guess that makes it also kind of feel a little bit new school.
It does front load a lot, like the Fray dice. And then leveling up is pretty incremental, but you don't feel too squishy at first level. Yeah.
I mean, at first level, you can still take on, like a group of orcs and survive as a first level fighter in Scarlet Heroes. Whereas first level D&D, OD&D, or basic D&D, or advanced D&D, you're gonna die. Just because the sheer number of the sheer number of attacks going against you and the likelihood that you're going to get hit, even if you're just taking 1 hit point of damage every swing, you're probably going to die. Especially if you're the only one in the party, which nobody assumes that, you're going to run solo. But that's one of the main differences of Scarlet Heroes. You can run solo.
Yeah.
Actually, we did have a question. Let me scroll back. Cardinal Sin said, is Vampire the Masquerade First Edition OSR? I don't consider that to be OSR, even though it's old. It's definitely a classic. But
What was it? 89 or 90?
Yeah, but it isn't. It is not OSR. It's not using the 6 stats. It's not using hit points. It's not using armor class. It's so different from D&D. I mean, you couldn't really call it OSR in the same way that you couldn't call Traveler OSR.
Right, White Wolf stuff sort of stands on its own, and that's okay. It doesn't have to have that label.
Yeah.
We're still talking about it. When was the last good White Wolf game published? So they did something right. It's just, it goes back to the thing. It's okay if things don't fit in a box. They don't have to fit in a box. If it's a good game and your table enjoys it, play it. Vampire, it's old, it's fond, it's nostalgic. It gives you a completely different experience than D&D. And if you sit down and you play old school D&D and you play Vampire and you have the same feelings and the same experience, then you're doing something wrong because they are that different.
Mm-hmm. And, likewise, people who are playing, there's a group of people out there who play D&D First Edition as rules as written, supposedly, with 1-to-1 time and all of those.
Well, no, they don't.
No. Ryan, calm down.
Okay, I was having a laugh.
Ryan, we're not kicking hornets' nests. Thank you.
No, we're face planting in them.
No, we hope not. But I mean, the thing is, I don't look down on the way that they play it. Certainly, they're doing what they're doing, and it's fine. I mean, I'm glad they're enjoying it their way. Would I play one of their games? Yeah, if they invited me, I probably would try it just to see what it's like. Is it OSR? Definitely. They're using the six stats and everything. Is it the only way to play? Is it the best way to play? It's debatable.
Are they weird psychopaths that are single-handedly supporting the graph paper economy? Yes.
Okay. Look. We're not labeling people. We're not going to do this. All right. I'm not.
I think it's obvious that I'm taking the piss.
Okay.
But this is the internet, so you never know.
Yeah, you never know. Somebody will use your stuff out of context and say, "Look what he said."
Yeah,
that doesn't happen.
That totally happens. That totally happens. And Bob Jester, look at that, Classic Traveler, Star Frontiers, West End Games, Star Wars, Paranoia, Gamma World. Yeah. Gamma World, out of all those, the old classic Gamma World is probably the closest to OSR, and even it doesn't quite fit the OSR mold because it's just different enough. I don't know that you can't really use it without a lot of conversion.
Editions commonly enough that it's never really become forgotten or old.
Mm-hmm. Now I played Giant Lands, which is definitely not OSR, with the oldest of old schoolers who's still alive. I played it with Jim Ward, the guy who invented Gamma World. And sure enough, he killed my ass. He killed the entire party. But that's kind of what he's known for anyway. I mean, now I've got the sticker and everything, I guess.
Paranoia came out in 1984, so it's not a classic until next year.
Oh, it's not a classic until next year? Oh well.
Yeah, sorry.
See, I consider it a classic. I don't consider it OSR. But, I think, like I said, people should maybe not worry so much about what is and isn't OSR as much as, are you having a good time at your game? Are your players having a good time at your game? Are your players getting a sense of fulfillment from the game that they're playing? Are they, when they advance, do they have like something to look forward to? You know, these are kind of more important questions as to, you know, trying to define yourself as to what is and isn't OSR, and, you know, who is part of it, who is not, who is playing the right way, who is not. You know, I love all these guys who are making stuff, whether it is actual OSR or not. And that includes people like, you know, Basic Expert. I'm so looking forward to his new, you know, Mesoamerican game. I think it's going to be great. Is it OSR? I don't know. He says it's probably not going to be OSR. It's probably going to be very different.
Adjacent.
OSR adjacent, yeah. But I do like his Atom Punk. I like it very much. I'm a little less enthusiastic about Cowpunchers, but maybe that's because I need to, you know, really understand the system a little bit more and give it a couple of plays. I didn't pick up on it as readily.
Surely you've encountered cows. You know they need a good punch.
Yeah. And yes, there are conversions in the first edition DMG for Gamma World and Top Secret. Yeah, I remember. You know, Victor Gorchev, he makes stuff that is straight up, you know, 5th edition or OSE. So yeah, I mean, is that stuff OSR? Yeah, I would say so. Am I glad he's doing it? Yes, I am. You know, again, I like Castles and Crusades. I support them. In fact, their latest Kickstarter is in July is when it ends. I backed it. I probably don't need those books because I've already bought them once, but what the hell? You know, I'm going to support the company I like, who's got the products I like. And it just, you know, I don't think we need to tar and feather anybody with are you OSR? Are you not OSR? Are you doing it the right way? Are you not doing it the right way? I think there's enough room out there under the umbrella for everybody to, you know, either fit under it or sit outside of it as they wish. You know? Is Machinations of the Space Princess OSR? I would say so.
It was explicitly designed to be so as an experiment.
Yeah, and it's very different. You know, even though it's got comeliness, it's like it's still very different from, like, you know, advanced D&D. So yeah, I mean, just looking at all the systems and stuff like that, you know, it's hard to say that any one is really better than the other. I think it's just, for the most part, most people like systems that involve levels. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, do we have anything else to comment on this? We're at an hour, so.
My head has still been on advancement systems. I'm just thinking about how many different ones there are, and there aren't that many.
There really isn't.
No, there's class level.
Yep.
There's individual rising skills that we get in basic role playing.
Yeah.
There's you don't advance at all, which we get in Traveller. There's random advancement from things like Darkly Dark, and to a lesser extent Mortborg, I think.
Yeah.
And then there's individual raising of various aspects of your character, like you get in Storyteller. And I can't think of any others.
There's point buys from GURPS. Oh, you know what? There's one I forgot to mention. I probably should, because it's old. Is Palladium. Would you call
True.
Palladium OSR?
I believe it's old enough. But itself, it's a retro clone.
Yeah.
Palladium Fantasy 1983. Yes, it's a classic.
Do I like Palladium? It takes forever to build a character. It takes forever to build a character, and it takes you 5 minutes to die. I will never forget the Rifts game that we played, where it took us 2.5 to 3 hours for everybody sitting at the table to build their character using the books and whatnot and getting it all written down. And at the end of it, we had our first game, and sure enough, one of the characters got killed like almost within the first combat. So, yeah, I like Palladium. I just think it's like unwieldy. Yeah, you got Palladium. Yeah, I still have my old copy. I think I've shown it off on stream a few times. Yeah, Rollmaster. Yeah. God.
Rollmaster's a classic as well, I think. That was 1983 as well.
Oh,
I think it was anyway. No, 1982.
Yep. And then we had Against the Dark Master, which is basically kind of like Rollmaster, sort of.
So in those, you got ranks, didn't you? I think there were levels, and then when you ranked up, you could tick a certain number of boxes in skills to raise the skill level.
Palladium was good in the 80s. Today it is an awful system. Was it good back in the 80s, though? I mean, yeah. I mean, if you just stuck with, the basic fantasy role-playing game, or not the Palladium fantasy role-playing game and nothing else, yeah, it was okay. Is horribly crunchy in all the wrong ways. Yeah. Their skill system tried to do too much, I think. I liked that it was percentage based. But it kind of seemed like it was trying to marry basic RPG with D&D. But maybe not doing it the right way.
No. Lots of very peculiar decisions in Palladium, but always lots of good ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love Kevin. I mean, he's a cool guy. So, I'm not going to diss him or his creation, but
doesn't treat his freelancers very well. But
yeah, well, I mean, if you looked at most of the creators from any era, they all tend to have their little foibles. I mean, I don't think Gary Gygax was the nicest person when he started out. Certainly, he liked his booger sugar, and that's not something to dislike him for. But the funny thing about Gygax is the old guy who was on Futurama and was kind of like your favorite uncle or something like that. That's a Gygax who was much older, who had already experienced loss and had attempted to try to repeat his success many times and failed. I mean,
it's a lot dangerous. Like Stan Lee in a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah. Those guys in their youth weren't necessarily the nicest people, but as they aged and got older and wiser and had more failures heaped upon them, and they kind of learned how to take it in stride and be more chill, and because Dangerous Journeys did not do well. Cyborg Commando, God, almost nobody remembers that one, and if you do, I'm sorry.
It's remembered for what we just talked about, right? It's remembered as the great failure. So,
yeah,
how would you like that in your legacy? You have something that is so abysmal that everybody remembers it, not that it's so good. Like, that's humbling, and that's part of what we saw at the end with Gygax.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of similar to the, to the thing I was talking about, not too long ago about Ahmed Best. It's the fact that, actors will take a lot of roles and they will not necessarily always do good ones. But the real measure of a good actor or a great actor is not the worst role you remember them in. It's the best role you remember them in. Because Michael Caine did a lot of shitty films, but Michael Caine is not remembered for his performance in Jaws: The Revenge. he's not necessarily remembered for The Hand. He's remembered for, Batman, the latest stuff that he's done.
Oh, I don't know.
The best
Zulu,
stuff
that was one of his earliest one. He was really good in that.
Yeah, Zulu, he was awesome in that.
Get Carter.
Yeah.
Italian Job, obviously.
Yeah. So, it's, who's the other guy? Oliver, what's his name, who died? He was one of
Oliver Reed.
Oliver Reed, yeah. Most people remember him from Gladiator, where he just, he stole the screen every time he was on it. They might
died
remember him
while they were shooting Gladiator, getting into a drinking contest with some sailors. Now that's the way to go.
It is. Bless his heart. You might remember him as Bill Fagan from Oliver. Do you remember him from Burnt Offerings? Not necessarily. I do, just because I'm an old school buff. But
Wasn't he the Wolfman in something?
He was. He played the Wolfman in an old Hammer film. Nobody remembers that, really. I mean, they might just because they're Hammer films. Well, I do. Well, I remember Burnt Offerings, but I mean, that's not the role that he's most widely known for.
No.
That's my point. And it's the same thing with game creators and anybody else. It's like you're not necessarily as good as the last game you made. You're as good as the best game you're remembered for. We don't remember Gygax for Cyborg Commando or Dangerous Journeys. We remember him because he's the guy who made D&D. We don't remember Greg Stafford for did he do anything really bad? I mean, he invented RuneQuest. That was kind of like
and it's been coasting on it for years.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if you're a one-hit wonder and you keep hitting that same note, I mean, why not? But, anyway, I think we're out of time anyway, aren't we? Or do we have anything else to really talk about?
I agree.
All right, then. Well, all right, guys. Well, shall we close it down for the night?
Aye.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds like a plan. All right, then.
Back to the grind, right?
Oh, yeah. I got stuff to write, stuff to illustrate, and I got to bug Grim all day.
Hooray.
Yep. That's right.
This motherfucker eating beef! Wait, no, it's not true, it's not true.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. We appreciate y'all very much. It was a little bit rambly today. And that's just because there's been a lot of stuff on my mind about this lately. Just kind of to put it into context, I've seen a lot of people fighting. Everybody is a friend of mine. I don't pick any sides. I won't pick any sides. And if that bothers you, then it's like, well, sorry. I want everybody to succeed. I want everybody to get along. I'm really, really grateful for all of the creators that I do know, and the few that I work with. There's enough room for everybody to put out their products and enjoy it, and there's enough room for everybody to play the game that they want.
Maybe the real OSR was the friends we made along the way.
I agree. I mean, that's the real OSR. Yeah. So, if you're out there and you're listening to this, secondhand, just understand that I support you in whatever you do. If you want to talk to me about whatever you're making, I'm happy to talk to you about it. I'm going to try to do my best not to, shit on anybody, unless they come at me and they deserve it, in which case it's like, hey man, you put your gloves on, you get hit. But, everybody should play the way that they want to. Everybody should play the game that they want to. Everybody should create the game that they want to. And they shouldn't have to worry about being labeled old school Renaissance or, or not old school Renaissance. Play the game you want to. Label the game the way you want to label it, and just have fun with it. Because really, that's what TTRPGing is at the end of the day. It's fun, or it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a form of escape. If it's not those two things, then maybe reconsider what you're doing. And yes, Wizards of the Coast, I'm looking at you. All right. See y'all next week.
Look! A Dungeons and Dragons ride!